And this passage shows us that there's a way to have true sight and understanding of grace. So let's go into the passage, and I'll start out with a little personal anecdote. And basically, I've had glasses on for as much as I can remember. It's probably a little before first grade. I noticed that I couldn't see the board, and my parents were like, "Oh, you're gonna have your dad's eyes." And my dad, he wears very thick glasses, and we just in our family have notoriously bad eyes and bad sight. And I had glasses on. I think it was in high school. I tried wearing contacts, and I don't think there's any photographic evidence to my knowledge. But yeah, I look very different without my glasses. And I'm just kidding. I'm not gonna show you. And it's hard to see anything without my glasses. I can't drive without my glasses. I can't identify people even far away with who they are without my glasses. And there are two types of sight, right? There are nearsighted people and farsighted people. Nearsighted meaning, well, they can see things close up and they can't see far away. Farsighted meaning they can see far away but can't see close by. And they would make glasses where they're bifocals, right? So meaning focus on two things. Top half will help you see far away, and bottom half will help you see closer up. I don't have that issue currently, but I feel like if I follow in my father's footsteps, I probably will need that. How many of you guys have poor vision? How many of you guys wear glasses, contacts, or even had laser eye surgery? Anyone? Some of us are blessed with perfect vision, 20/20, clear vision, fully seeing everything the way it is. But many of us, even today in the raid, right? We had people who are, they don't have spiritual sight. As well as we can see in real life, if we don't have the ability to see truly with spiritual sight, we're still blind. No matter how well we can see in life, if we don't have the sight that God provides, we will be blinded. You're a couple of slides behind, Andrew. We're in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 4 now. Yeah. What makes spiritual blindness? What makes people blind to see with their full spiritual eyes? In the case that, as it says in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 4, in their case, the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. People have a hard time seeing God because the God of this world has blinded the heart, blinded the minds, blinded us from seeing the light of the glory of our God, our Messiah, Jesus Christ, of the gospel. And the gospel of the glory of Christ, the image of God, is what we need to see so that we don't stay blind, stay in the darkness. And this metaphor, this analogy, this is repeated over and over throughout Scripture, right? God splits the light and darkness, and He gives the sight to the blind. Christ heals the blind over and over again. And later on, even in the different passages that we'll even look at today, helps us to see with our full spiritual sight, because God gives us, not leaves us chained up in darkness, but into the light, brings us free. What makes Christians, those who are becoming more and more glorified, right, sanctified into glorifications, having sight but not really see everything, being born again, but still have a little bit of a blurry understanding. Seeing, they do not see. Jesus warns us that it isn't just the eyes that we need to be focusing on, just as He told us and taught us in the past, which we looked at previously, that hearing isn't just hearing, right? It needs to be understood in such a way that it transforms us. Sin in a Christian's life clogs the sight. It's kind of blurry. I don't know if you guys ever heard the term konkatsu. It's a corn bean sprout covering that once it starts sprouting, it peels off, and it's just like almost very, not completely clear, but a blurry kind of thing. Anyway, once you first fall in love and you're in the honeymoon stage and you don't really know the person's like inner workings, you have this like covering. You only see the goodness, and so like your best buddies will come up and be like, oh, you need to get that filter off. You need to see this person for who they are. Anyway, sin is kind of like this. It clogs our vision. Ephesians 1:18, having the eyes of your heart enlightened, that you may know what is the hope to which he has called you, what are the riches of his glorious inheritance in the saints. And as you can see, this passage is taken straight out of the first chapter. Please take a look at the chapter and look at the context. There's several verses before and after this to understand the fullness of it. But basically saying that it is the eyes of our heart that has to be enlightened for us to understand. Understand what? Jesus. The more Jesus that we understand, more of Jesus, more Jesus that we have in our life, the more we get to see clearer and clearer, and the blurriness starts to fade. And this is the work of the sanctifying grace. And there's two types of graces that we're going to be looking at today. And grace doesn't necessarily have to be broken up into different parts like we're doing today. Grace is grace. Unmerited blessing of God onto us. Right? It's undeserved. There's instantaneous grace. If you are a believer and follower of Jesus Christ and you commit into a deep personal relationship with Jesus, then you are instantly saved. There is instant grace. And this regeneration, this rebirth, this born-again life is unmerited, nothing to do with what we can and can't do, nothing we have to do to see better. It is, we see Jesus clearly and we run after him. Sanctifying grace that we're going to be focusing on, we title it this to help us understand that it is an ongoing process of holiness. Sanctification is the ongoing process of holiness, being separate, away from the world and drawn closer to God. Being closer and closer to God helps us to see God clearer and clearer. This is the ongoing process of holiness. It's wonderful for us because this is the work of Christ regardless, right? It is his compassion. It is the work of a tender, loving God who loves us, not just at the beginning of our salvation, but for us to be with God in the holy of holy places. In order for us to get to that place, we need to be like him. And so that process of us shedding off the old self, shedding off this scale of sin, is the process that only God can do. What I mean, especially within the context, is this is the town, right? Bethsaida is a town. Bethsaida, translated, is the house of the hunter or house of the fisherman. It's a fishing community, fishing town. 3 of the disciples come from this place. And this is a place where miracles were being done. And Jesus later warns, right? More miracles have been done before, but if they had the same miracles as you guys have seen, they would be transformed and changed. And he warns them clearly about this, and that it isn't just about miracles. And they came to Bethsaida, this place where Jesus does the ministry, and some people brought him a blind man and begged him to touch him. Here is a God who is, again, compassionate, tender, and loving, who comes and touches, begs people to touch the untouchable, the people who are diseased in such a way where they thought it was brought on by sin, generational sin or personal sin, that they have been plighted with this disease, this problem. And during that time, none of the people who are considered holy would dare even come near them, let alone touch them. And here's Jesus, and then in verse 23, and he took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the village. And when he had spit on his eyes and laid his hands on him, he asked him, do you see anything? Here is our personal Lord and Savior who comes and takes us by the hand, who is not afraid to touch the evil and muck and dirtiness of it all. And here he is taking this blind man who has never been touched by somebody as holy as Christ, or even close, right? To be led away. And here we are begging the Lord to touch our lives, touch our hearts. And this is where that comes from. A disease by birth or by birth defect or something that is a time period where people had to live with this. They just had to live with the disease. And because of this, they blamed God for their plight, their problems. They were the untouchables. And this continued on until probably the 19th century when the first vaccines and the first cures came about. But even now, we still blame God for these things, the problems of the world. But does not change, and it takes focus away from the purpose of the gospel, which is that Jesus came first to love, that Jesus came first to hold us by the hand, touch our hearts, and bring us salvation. Right? It isn't about finger pointing and blaming God. It is to see and reach out so that we can receive his tender touch. Jesus is the one who's able to understand and sympathize. And so we see in Hebrews chapter 4, verse 15 through 16, "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect have been tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need." So Jesus takes this man out of the sight of all the people who only want miracles, who only want something for themselves, right? To be healed instantly. They want these things done for them, and Jesus leads him out of this town, out of this village, and then performs the miracle away from the sight of everybody who wanted something from Jesus for themselves. Why does he spit into this man's eye? It's not really clear, but Jesus does use his saliva, his spit, before. He used it in 2 other healings, another blind man and the deaf. But if we look at the other miracles, it's an agent of his power. It's a way to use his authority of godly, divine power. He also told the lepers to walk toward it. And as they were walking, the walking was a process of the healing. The spit, to me, is also the same. He also asked the lame man to go into the pool of Siloam. And the pool of Siloam isn't the miracle work, right? Jesus is the miracle work. And so it really doesn't matter the thing that he uses, right? The cloak, the edge of his clothing also did the miracle work. It's just a way for, I think, God to use, Jesus to use in his authority, in his possession, in his power to bring about healing. And if we are honest, if Jesus' spit is to perform miracles, I'd say let him go ahead and spit on our lives. And it may sound weird, right? Because it seems offensive. But we need to understand that this is an agent of his work. And it may not be culturally sensitive, or it may not be what we would consider beautiful. But if we really saw what this blind man was able to see, I think it's still beautiful. It's not gross. This miracle is particularly amazing in many respects because it falls in the book of Mark, the Gospel of Mark, right in the middle of Jesus' public ministry and now going into what we consider in the theological world a private ministry where he disciples specifically his students, his followers, disciples, right? He trains them and teaches them in a very specific way. So he was very public, and this is the last of his very public ministry, and he does it kind of privately, and that segue is happening, and it's beautifully placed. It's amazing. It's almost divinely placed in this place like this, and where he is able to use a 2-stage healing. First is the healing where the man is healed partially, fully in God's way, to see some but not fully see everything the way it ought to be, and he heals him fully the second time completely to see everything clearly, 20/20 vision type. And the before this and after this, it is perfectly placed to teach us our sanctifying life. The work of Christ's sanctifying work in our life is that also. We're first fully saved. We see Jesus, but as we live a life of holiness more and more, we see Jesus clearer and clearer, and to the point of glorification, which is a day where everything is toward God. And the only way, again, to be in God's presence is to be like Him, to be totally holy. Because no unholy thing or person can enter the Holy of Holy places. That's the work of the sanctifying grace that God has provided us. And this passage, this miracle teaches us this. That once Jesus is in our lives, we get to see Him, but we get to see Him even better as the Christian life continues. And then the word here in the Greek, there's like 5 different words. There's the main word for eyes or sight, and then there's different prefixes and suffixes that are added to this word, and there are 5 different versions. They pretty much, Mark is writing basically every version of sight there is into this passage, and it's talking about partial sight. It's talking about seeing, and at the end, the last word we see here is the fullness of sight, the complete. It's like a penetrating sight, where you can see beyond what it is. So this man has been restored, regenerated toward the point where he can see beyond what we would consider perfect vision, from not seeing to seeing and seeing fully. So there's this complete progressionary linear line of beginning, middle, and end. And that's where we are. That's the Christian life. We have a beginning, a middle, and an end. The beginning from non-Christian, from not seeing, worshiping the world, to seeing Christ, a personal Lord and Savior, and then seeing Him changing our lives to the point where that ongoing process, the middle part, helps us become more and more holy, the sanctifying work, and to the point of glory where we're one with God. And that's the end for us, right? Jesus shows us that His significance at this point is to reveal God's divinity, God's power, that the ongoing work of Christ is not to be ended by Him alone, but be moved on to His apostles. And later in this chapter even, Peter confesses that Jesus is the Christ. He says, "You are Christ, Son of the living God. You are God. You are the Messiah, the Savior." Psalm 146 verse 8, "The Lord opens the eyes of the blind. The Lord lifts up those who are bowed down. The Lord loves the righteous." This is the first part of salvation. And the beginning of all Christians may look a little different. And it may be different. How we start. And the baggage that we bring is all different. But the work of Christ is the same. He saves all sinners. Do you see Jesus as your personal Lord and Savior and King and Master? Are we bowing to Him in our very daily lives? This is the preview of God's glory on earth. This is the sanctifying grace of a lifelong journey with Christ. And no one can do this for you. No one can just pass on their faith. We have to see Jesus with our own eyes. He has to be our personal Lord and Savior. I believe this is in 2 parts. To show not only the disciples, but to show us that the saving part of our faith isn't the end of our faithful walk. Many of us think we're saved and that's enough, and I'll live my life, I'll pursue my goals and my aim. And we lose sight, we focus tunnel vision on and we lose sight of the beautiful everything that God has done. We have to first confess not only of our sins, but confess that Jesus is the one who forgives. Many of us, again, we believe but we don't fully understand. We see, but we don't fully, clearly, perfectly see. And we've heard this before, right? But do we fully understand it? How many of us can say we see him clearly today? I don't mean in toasts or like wall paintings and like things like this. I mean truly see him in such a way that he transforms our thoughts and decision making, the way we speak and how we treat others. How a Christian ought to act, not because it is written down somewhere for as a checklist, but for a Christian to love everybody the way Christ would have. To sit with the sinners, eat with the sinners, speak with the sinners in such a way that the kingdom of heaven is near to them too. That the gospel is alive and active because our Lord has risen from the grave. The resurrection is real, right? He is the one that takes us, draws us out from the darkness into the beautiful light where nothing is hidden and everything is revealed. There is no more shame, no more fear, no more worry, no more tears. I believe when we see Jesus, it changes us and transforms us in such a way that we belong in the light and the darkness is now foreign to us. We see a little bit more and more, and as we get closer and closer to the light, we see it. You know, like when you walk from a dark room to a light room, your eyes need a second to adjust. It's just that. When we see Jesus for who he really is, it takes us a second. And it's that process, that sanctifying work, that adjustment that is so necessary. And that's what we call the gospel. The gospel is necessary every day because it's so true. It's the key. It's the good news. That's why we call it good news, because we're saying it to everybody. Hey, there's darkness in the world, and everybody can confess and admit to this. But what they don't get to see is the light, and we need the key to help them see. And that's the gospel of Jesus Christ and Jesus alone. Not the gospel of me, not the gospel of some building, but gospel of who Jesus really is, that he is the good news to the blind, good news to the deaf, good news to the brokenhearted, suffering in this pandemic, in this racial inequality, in this craziness that we call the world. No two Christians share the same exact past. No one shares the beginning. But the saving work of Christ is the same for every Christian. Because it starts with God's grace. It starts with his word. It starts with his saving grace, right? Saving work, not ours.